Hello, my name is Ari Waldman. I'm a person who stutters. This is my video Tanya, day 54, Thursday, December 17th, 2020, the second day of the Jewish month of Kislev, the seventh day of Hanukkah. I'm going to be working on pausing. From Chabad.org, daily study, daily Tanya, Likutei Amarim, beginning of chapter 6, Thursday, 2nd Tevet, 5781. In the previous chapters, the Alter Rebbe discussed the divine soul, its 10 faculties, 3 intellectual and 7 emotional, and its 3 garments, by which it expresses itself, namely, the thought, speech, and action of Torah and the mitzvot. He explained that the garments of the divine soul are actually on a higher level than the soul itself, inasmuch as Torah and God are one, and that by clothing itself in these garments, i.e., by studying the Torah and by performing the mitzvot, the soul is united with God. This is particularly true of Torah study, in which the soul both embraces and is embraced by the godliness contained in Torah. In chapter 6, the Alter Rebbe begins to discuss the animal soul. He explains that its structure exactly parallels that of the divine soul. It too has 10 faculties and 3 garments. Only unlike the divine soul, the substance of the animal soul is klipa, and its faculties and garments are impurity. By clothing itself in these garments, the animal soul descends to an even lower level of impurity. Concerning the concept of klipa, we have noted in chapter 1 that although all existence was created by and receives its life from godliness, yet in order that man to be able to choose between God and evil, good and evil, and that he earn his reward by serving his Creator by his own effort, God created forces of impurity which conceal the godliness in all creation. These forces are called klipa, plural klipot, literally meaning shells or peels. Just as the shell conceals the fruit, so do the forces of klipa conceal the godliness in every created being. There are 2 categories in klipot: klipat noga, literally a klipa inclusive of light, and the 3 unclean klipot. The first category, klipat noga, contains some measure of good. It is thus an intermediary level between the realms of good and evil. And whatever receives its vitality via the concealing screen of this klipa may be utilized for either good or evil. To this category belong all permitted physical objects. They may be used for a mitzvah and ascend thereby to the realm of holiness, or they may be used sinfully, God forbid, and thereby be further degraded. The second category, consisting of the 3 impure klipot, is wholly evil. Whatever receives its vitality via the concealment of this type of klipa cannot be transformed into holiness, nor in some cases may it even be used in the service of holiness. To this category belong all forbidden physical objects, whether forbidden only for consumption, in which case they cannot be transformed into holiness, but they may serve it, or whether forbidden for any form of benefit, in which case they cannot even serve any holy purpose. V'hine ze lu'umat ze asa Elohim. The Almighty has created one thing opposite the other. Everything in the realm of holiness has its counterpart in Klippa. In our context, the animal soul with its faculties and garments is the counterpart in Klippa of the divine soul with its faculties and garments. Ki kamo shenefesh ha'Elohim klula me'eser sfirat kedoshot u'mitlabeshet bishlosha levushim kedoshim. Just as the divine soul consists of 10 holy faculties, which correspond to the 10 supernal sephirot, and is clothed in 3 holy garments, i.e. the thought, speech, and action of Torah and the mitzvot. Kach hanefesh de sitra achara miklipot, noga hamilu beshet, bedam ha'adam. So too, the soul of sitra achara, defined further in this chapter, derived from klipa noga, which is clothed in man's blood. As explained in chapter 1, the animal soul is clothed in the blood and thereby animates the body, this soul too. Klula me eser kitrin de mis sa'avuta dim sa'avuta. Klula me eser kitrin dim sa'avuta consists of 10 crowns of impurity. I.e., the faculties of Klippa, called crowns in Kabbalistic terminology. Shehein sheva midot ra'ot, these 10 faculties are 7 evil midot, 7 emotional traits. Example, lust, the equivalent in Klippa of the midah of chesed. Kindness, anger, which expresses the midah of gevura, severity, boastfulness. The equivalent of tiferet, beauty, and so forth. Habaot me'arba yesodot ra'im hanizkarim le'el, which stem from the 4 elements mentioned above in chapter 1. Spiritual entities have their elements as physical objects do. In the case evil elements, since this is a soul of Klippa. V'seichel hamolidan hanechlak l'shalosh shehen chachma bina v'da'at makor hamidot. And the intellect, seichel, which gives birth to these 7 evil midot, which is subdivided into 3, vis-a-vis chokhmah, bina, and dat, the source of the midot. Ki amidotein, lefi erech haseichel, the intellectual faculties are described as the source of the evil midot, for the midot are commensurate with the quality of one's intellect. Ki hakatan choshech choshek ve'ohev devarim ketanim b'chutei ha'erech lefi shesichlo katan ve'katzar lehasig devarim yekarim yoter mehem. A child desires and loves, i.e., he expresses his midah of chesed toward petty things of little value, for his intellect is too immature and deficient to appreciate more valuable things. V'chein mitka'is umitkatzef midvarim ketanim v'chein behit pa'arut ushar midot. Similarly, with regard to the midah of gevura, he is angered and vexed by trivial things. And likewise, with regard to boastfulness, which expresses the midah of tiferet and other midot. This correlation between midot and intellect indicates that the intellect affects the nature and expression of midot. And for this reason, the three intellectual faculties are said to be the source of the 7 midot. Ve'eser bechinot elu hatmeot kishe'adam mechashev bahen o medaber o osa. Now these 10 unclean categories, when a person thinks thoughts originating from them, example, when he thinks of ways of obtaining something, he desires or speaks words originating from them, or does an act which serves or expresses them. Hare machash avto shebemocho v'diburo shebefiv v'choach hamasi shebiyadav ushar evarav nikraim levushe misa'avu le'osher le'eser bechinut elu hatmeot. Then the thought in his brain, the words in his mouth, and the power of action in his hands and other organs are called impure garments for these 10 unclean categories. Shem mit labshot bahen bishat ma'ase o dibur o machashava, which clothe themselves in these garments during the act, speech, or thought. But what sort of thoughts, words, and actions are the garments of the animal soul? Earlier in chapter 4, we learned that the divine soul has specific thoughts, etc., in which it clothes itself, namely thought, speech, and action. In matters of Torah and the mitzvot, are we then to understand that the animal soul too has specific garments? Sinful thoughts, words, or actions, perhaps? Not so, states the Alter Rebbe presently. All thoughts, words, and acts that are not directed toward God and the service of God, even though they are not actually sinful, are garments of the klipa and hence of the animal soul, in his words. V'hein heim kol hama'asim asher na'asim tachat hashemesh. These garments of the animal soul comprise all the deeds that are done under the sun, i.e., all mundane actions, asher hakol hevel urut ruach uchmo, shekatuv bazohar, b'shalach shehein, tiviru, drucha chule, which are all vanity and an affliction of the spirit of the Zohar. Parshat Beshalach interprets this a ruination of the spirit of holiness. V'chein kol hadiburim v'chol hamachashavot asher lo laHashem heima v'lirtzono v'la'avodato. Similarly, all words and all thoughts that are not directed to God and to His will and His service are all garments for the animal soul. Shezehu perush lishon sitra achra, perush tzad acher, she'eno tzad hakedusha. For this is the meaning of the term sitra achara, literally the other side, i.e. not the side of holiness. Thus, whatever does not belong to the realm of holiness is sitra achara. But what in fact does the realm of holiness encompass? Tzad hakedusha eino ella hashra v'ham shacha mikdushato shel hakadosh baruch hu. The side of holiness is nothing but the indwelling and extension of God's holiness. Ve'ein hakadosh baruch hu shora ella al davar shebatel etzlo yitbarech bein befoal mamash kim malachim elyonim. Now God dwells only on that which is surrendered to Him, whether the surrender is an actual one and visible even in that surrendered being's external aspects, as is the case with the supernal angels, whose entire being is constantly and openly surrendered to God. Bein bechoach kechol ish Yisrael lemata shebechocho liyot batel mamash legabe hakadosh baruch hu b'msirat nafsho al kedusha Hashem. Whether it is a potential surrender, as in the case of every Jew here below in this physical world, who has the capacity for surrendering himself completely before God through martyrdom for the sanctification of God's name. As explained further in the Tanya, every Jew has the capacity for such self-sacrifice in the face of an attempt to coerce him to forsake Judaism. He will willingly suffer martyrdom. Thus, every Jew possesses internally within his soul the potential for surrender to God. Whatever his external state, this potential, however, may reveal itself only in the act of martyrdom, because he is surrendered to God. God's holiness rests upon him. V'lachein amru rabotenu zichronam livracha sha'afilu echad sheyoshe v'osek b'torah shchina shruya chule. That is why our sages have said that if even one individual sits and engages in Torah study, the divine presence rests upon him. Shchina shruya chule, for when one engages in Torah study, his surrender to godliness emerges to affect him on a revealed external level, since such study entails setting aside one's own notions and presumptions in order to understand and accept God's wisdom and will as expressed in Torah. In this surrender to godliness that causes the divine presence to rest upon the Torah student. V'chol bei asara shechinta sharia liolam. Also on each gathering of 10 Jews, the divine presence rests. Also together, 10 Jews form a congregation of Israel, which fit abode for the divine presence. This is the end of my video, Tanya. I just want to expound upon footnote 3. Let's go back, because this footnote 3 is a little more extensive than the other footnotes. Just bear with me. It's 2. Seeing it. 7. Past it. It's 5. 3. It has to do with the following. This passage, refer back. This correlation between midot and intellect indicates that the intellect affects the nature and expression of midot, and for this reason, the 3 intellectual faculties are said to be the source of the 7 midot. 3, what is this referred to, midot? Comparison 3, this is the bottom footnote. Comparison of the Alter Rebbe's description here of the faculties of the animal soul with his description in chapter 3 of the divine soul yields several significant differences. In chapter 3, the seichel faculties are given first,